From the dietary choices of ancient pharaohs to the exotic pets that followed their masters beyond the grave. Today, we look at the most bizarre things the ancient Egyptians did. Number 8. Fat pharaohs. Modern depictions of ancient Egyptians along with hieroglyphics typically granted the people moderately slender features, but when it came to pharaohs and the upper-class members of society, that might not be so accurate. Many recognize the build of pharaohs from the thin, decrepit, and mummified remains taught about in school. Their original size may have been a bit more plump, though. In recent years, scientists have learned some remains exhibited signs of serious artery damage and heart disease, combined with translated hieroglyphics describing the diet of devout ancient Egyptians. This compilation of evidence proves that at least some of the population indulged in gluttonous behavior, consuming mass amounts of bread, fruit, cake, wine, beer, and meats. Many priests and pharaohs that were examined via X-ray by modern scientists are thought to have eaten the ancient equivalent to junk food. But these eating habits were nearly exclusive to the very top of the social hierarchy, with most Egyptians being restricted to an almost vegetarian lifestyle. Number 7. Fun and games. Despite their distinctness for hard work as proven by the towering wonders of the Egyptian pyramids, sphinxes, and other stonework, members of this ancient culture still knew how to unwind. Rather than taking enjoyment in long bacchanal celebrations or coliseum spectating like the ancient Romans, the Egyptians opted for a more wholesome form of entertainment in the form of board games. The most popular of these games was called Senet, and players would control a set of pawns and a small board containing 3 rows of 10 squares. The objective of the game is to be the first player to pass into the afterlife while dodging signs of misfortune using random chance with some small applications of skill and strategy. More than just a game, though. The winner was thought to be rewarded with divine protection. The board game was placed in graves and tombs after their demise with the idea that they would be able to utilize them on their way to the underworld. Other ancient Egyptian board games include the snake-shaped game Mehen, the square and statistics-based game called Asib, and the cribbage-esque race board game of hounds and jackals. All of these games, from the boards to the dice, were carved intricately out of ivory, ebony, and stone. This caused them to be highly valued, with many within the ancient culture unable to afford the materials or time associated with such leisure. Number 6. Female independence. Ancient Egyptians put great importance on the concept of duality and balance. This is evident by the exceptional equality displayed in historical findings, where women are depicted and recorded in fields traditionally associated with men. Powerful queens are shown destroying their enemies and executing prisoners by bow, while armed female warriors are pictured combating invaders in historical illustrations. Initially thought to be fictitious, further discoveries have added some sense of truth to these scenes of feminine power. Graves of ancient Egyptian women have been found with weapons buried at their side, evidence of female royalty leading military campaigns, and the recording of some ladies so dangerous that they were labeled enemies of the state. Women in ancient Egypt were often considered an oddity by neighboring cultures, as foreign men found it strange to see freedoms such as the allowance to trade in the marketplace and the allowance to exhibit self-determined, empowering behavior granted to them. The Greek historian Herodotus is noted as saying the Egyptians have reversed the ordinary practices of mankind. Combat and the marketplace aren't the only domains they excelled at, though. Research showed women coordinating religious rituals, commanding ships, and even receiving equal pay in ancient Egypt. They were even able to become Pharaoh. So in some ways, ancient Egypt may have been a bit more civilized than some countries today. Number 5. Ancient unions. Drawing on their valued belief in balance both in oneself and in society, this belief is represented by the term ma'at and followed by this belief. The pharaoh tended to rule just and fairly for the good of society rather than the good of themselves. However, due to everyone in ancient Egyptian society subscribing to the Ma'at philosophy, a hierarchy of contributory job roles was subsequently required. As such, not everyone was going to get the most famous career options. So when resources and awkward circumstances left the pharaoh short-handed in his ability to provide, there were surprisingly society-disrupting repercussions. During one of those instances, under the rule of Pharaoh Ramses III, the people of ancient Egypt were pushed to their limits. The first strike in history was recorded as occurring in 1159 BC, as workers demonstrated at the pharaoh's mortuary temple before hosting a sit-in protest at another temple. These protests would continue over the years as the flustered government would struggle to catch up on payments for weeks of labor and acquiesce to the request of their people. The creative protesters would even stage demonstrations at the hallowed grounds of the Valley of Kings, going so far as to threaten the destruction of sacred tombs before giving up their fight for pay. Finally, the workers received their appropriate compensation in 1156, but the damage had been done, changing the culture of ancient Egypt forever. The role of the pharaoh to maintain balance in the kingdom had been taken on by common folk of society, and they succeeded. Number 4. Birth bricks. The subject of childbirth varies from culture to culture, even in modern times, with many people having different takes on factors like whether to birth at home or the hospital, with a midwife or with a doctor, and with or without medication. But today, you would have an arduous time finding someone willing to practice the more than 3,000-year-old tradition of the ancient Egyptians, which require a mother to squat atop large bricks to deliver her baby. Almost more important than the birthing position of the mother, though, were the bricks on which she stood. Infant mortality rates at this period in history were significantly higher than modern statistics, and because of this, children were thought to require further protection from evil forces when entering the world. To accomplish this, the ancient Egyptians made the bricks used during childbirth into sacred objects, adorned with scenes and imagery of the gods. Deities like the sun god Ra and the fertility goddess Hathor were inscribed onto these stones to look after the child as it enters the world for the first time. For centuries, these bricks were known only through visual depictions in text and hieroglyphics. But in 2001, intact examples were finally found, and the ancient Egyptian practice was confirmed. Number 3. Extreme construction. No accomplishment or activity by the ancient Egyptians comes anywhere close to being as impressive as the pyramids. What is more often hotly debated instead, though, are the means by which they were constructed. It was first hypothesized by the ancient Greeks that these great monuments were erected on the backs of thralls performing forced labor. However, modern research suggests something different. Scholars have found evidence suggesting that those that worked on the pyramids, specifically those that worked on the Great Pyramid, were constructed by tens of thousands of skilled craftsmen, all of which toiled away in exchange for a salary or as a means to pay taxes. Scholars believe billions of blocks weighing several tons each were assembled into each position at a pace of 3 blocks a minute during these 10-hour workdays. Each pyramid required years to finish, with the largest taking up to a decade. On top of the sheer scale of the pyramids, another oddity for the time period is the exceptional precision found in their construction. Scientists and historians have hypothesized for ages about what tools could have been employed to create such meticulously crafted colossals. And yet, evidence toward the specifics has been mostly barren. A simple ramp was found in 2012 near the quarry settlement of Hatnub, confirming long-standing suspicions but also opening the door to even more questions. Number 2. Animal caretakers. Along with their massively golden tombs, awe-inspiring structures, and expansive kingdoms, ancient Egyptians, especially the upper class, grew to enjoy many luxuries. Among these indulgent pleasures were the ownership of exotic pets like baboons, fish, gazelles, falcons, and mongooses. Even vicious large animals like lions, hippos, and crocodiles were kept as sacred pets for the worship of their respectively associated deities. While the animals often served some religious purpose, scholars tend to believe ancient Egyptians were just as fond of their creature companions as modern owners are with their dog or cat. Thus, when it came time to carry over into the afterlife, owners made sure to arrange travel plans for their pets too. In one instance, the high priestess Motker-Mudumhat was excavated with what researchers believed to be her baby and initially thought she had passed during birth and was buried with her child. But that didn't add up as her priestess status guaranteed her celibacy, and so, with X-ray technology, researchers examined the smaller mummy's remains and were surprised to find it to actually be the remains of a monkey. Not all animals got to be buried with their owners, but that didn't necessarily mean they were less celebrated. Even though it was more than 3 millennia ago, to the ancient Egyptians, pets like the dog were still considered to be man's best friend. Number 1. Cosmetic craze. Dusty sand dunes and dry heat at all times are bound to cause some major skin damage. Fortunately for the ancient Egyptians, though, they knew how to cover it up. But just because they enjoyed the use of makeup didn't make it any easier to come by. Made of various minerals found in the region, like stibnite and red clay, the dark and colorful makeup was applied using metal, wooden, and ivory tools. The makeup was used not only to accent their features, but also to serve medical benefits as well, as the ancient Egyptians would employ tactics like elaborate eye makeup to shield against the sun, deter insects, and protect against eye disease.